Yesterday in class, we watched a performance of what I think is easily the most famous sermon in all of ancient literature. It's when Jesus shares the Sermon on the Mount. It spans from Matthew 5 through Matthew 7. Now, one of the things that I really want you guys to understand is that this is not the only sermon that has found its way into the archives of ancient literature and part of what we call like the canon of famous literature. We also have Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Quite a few of Dr. King's speeches could be considered sermons. So it's actually pretty common for a sermon to be considered a piece of persuasive rhetoric. And we're going to be looking at it as such today. Yesterday in class, we stopped the video. There were just a few verses left. When the speaker in the video stopped reading, we were around verse 15 in chapter 7. So I would like for you to finish just the rest of chapter 7. There's only 14 verses left, so go ahead and finish that up. But I told you yesterday that in class today, we would have been writing a reflection. So you're going to do this, but I want you to consider the question that I posed yesterday. What of all of the different things that Jesus tells his followers to do, what do you feel like is the hardest thing to reconcile? And I shared with you that for me, it's absolutely, his concept of forgiveness, that if we don't forgive others for the atrocious things that happen, then our own forgiveness or eternity, if that is the religion that you believe in, is really at stake. The other thing that I really wanted to point out to you before I had you write this reflection is the rhetoric and the style of persuasion that Jesus uses. So I wanted to share, if you look up right by my TV, you see 4 little squares that has these 4 rules, and they are these: be prepared, be respectful, be your best self, and be responsible. And what was interesting about me deciding that these would be the norms of my classroom, I think back to when I was in undergrad at the University of Southern Indiana in I believe it was my Education 198 class, which is one of the first classes on your path to getting your teaching degree. I was asked to create my class rules, and the professor shared that we needed to be very thoughtful about what we wanted to make a rule. Because when you list a whole bunch of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't throw things, don't be late, don't turn in late work, don't be unkind, don't do this, don't do that, then really it becomes quite difficult to encompass a full list of the hundreds of things that you shouldn't do. And as a teacher and as a mom, I find myself often thinking, why would I even have to say this? One example that I often think about, my son one time was riding his 4-wheeler in the church sanctuary. I would have never been able to fathom that I would ever have to say, Isaiah, don't drive your 4-wheeler in the church sanctuary. Definitely would not have been on my list of rules. So when we have a situation like that, we have to keep adding to the list of rules all the time, because people do more stupid things that we would have never thought of to not do or to say to not do. And that's exactly what happened in the Old Testament, like in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Numbers. All of these different rules become added to Jewish law, like don't drag your chair across the floor on the Sabbath. Don't eat this kind of meat. Don't do that. And there were literally, I think 700 to 800 different rules in Jewish law, and there was no way, first of all, that they could all be remembered, let alone followed. So Jesus comes and he flips the script with this, and he, uses a rhetorical strategy that is still very sound to this day. Be clear, be concise. So just like my classroom rules, and be prepared, be responsible, be your best self, those encompass a lot of things that I don't want you to do. I don't want you to plagiarize. Well, be your best self. Be responsible. That kind of falls under that umbrella. Be respectful. That encompasses, be nice to each other, be nice to subs, don't be rude, don't, cuss. I could make a list of all of those different things that I don't want you to do, but these simple 4 rules encompass almost everything that I could possibly think of. not only is it simple, it also is easy to remember. Whereas I could fill my whole wall with the things that I don't want kids to do, especially my freshmen. Don't get me started on that. But I just want you to think about that. You know, my parents and other people that have influenced me used to say to not tell a kid more than 3 things at a time. Like if you're wanting somebody to go to the store, or your spouse, and you want them to get apple juice, bread, and milk. If you add one more thing, they're normally going to forget one of those 4, because most people can remember 3 things at a time. Obviously on my rules I have 4, but I still have them up there on the board as something to remember. So Jesus uses this strategy for motivating us, and he makes things much more simple than they were in the Mosaic law, where we have this list of 10 things that mostly are, thou shalt nots. Some of them are like honor the Sabbath, are things that you should do, but over half the list is, thou shalt nots. And he sums it all up. And in verse 12 in chapter 7, he says, do for others what you would like them to do for you. This is the summary of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. So that's something to think about and maybe apply, since our driving question for this whole class is what can we learn in the modern era from these biblical characters. I think we can definitely, take some strategies away from Jesus when we're, moving into adulthood and starting to raise kids after you did get a degree or a job and get married, in that order. Wink, wink. But we can take his strategies that he uses and apply them, and I think that we will be better communicators and better leaders. Just be thinking about those things and applying them, to your life if you feel like his strategies are good. But as you consider them, I want you to write a reflection about the Sermon on the Mount and turn it in today. Have a great day.